What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 483. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from... Do you say there was a blizzard in Colorado?
Oh, yeah. It's kind of funny because it's like a one-day blizzard warning. It was like the storm warning was from like 4 p.m. or 10 a.m. Wednesday till like Wednesday night.
Whoa.
And we got like about a foot of snow in those, in those like 10 hours or whatever, 8 hours. But it's really weird because it went from Monday, I didn't wear a jacket. I just wore a t-shirt because it was like pretty warm out. And then Wednesday it was blizzard. We had stocked up on supplies, didn't leave the house. Everything was shut down. Everything was closed. And then now it's Friday again. And I'm again like, yeah, I don't think I need a jacket anymore.
Wow. That is insane. By the way, that's Luis Scott-Vargas. What does a blizzard actually mean? Does it just mean a lot of snow?
I think it's measured in terms of snowfall more than anything else.
Now, if you said you got a foot in 10 hours, now to me that sounds completely ridiculous. Is that a lot for Colorado?
Yeah, it's a lot. Colorado doesn't get like too many blizzards. Part of what made this one actually shut everything down was it had up to 80 mile per hour winds as well.
Oh, okay.
So it was just not a good time to be out.
Wow. All right. Well, but it's okay now. Everything.
Yeah. It's sunny out now. There's no snow anywhere.
So when I went to the team GP in Denver a few months ago, it was similar. When we landed, it was like 65, beautiful out. And at some point it snowed and we were scraping the windows in the morning. And then the next day it was sunny again. I was just like, I can't keep up with this place. And we have kind of weird weather here too. Anyway, enough about that. We've got a bevy of topics on the show this week. We are going to do a Ravnica Allegiance crack-up draft. So this is where we get to go extra deep, not just to pack one, pick one, but we go 3 or 4 picks deep into a draft and kind of give you an idea of what we're thinking about, why we might change course or, whatever. We're also going to touch on Modern Horizons and the limited implications for that. And we're going to go a little deep on War of the Spark. We normally, we'll talk a little bit about the sets before they come out, but we kind of save it for the set review and for the set prior to that. But here, War of the Spark announced something really interesting, that there's going to be a Planeswalker in every pack. And that affects Limited in a very meaningful way. And we wanted to talk about it ahead of time just from a kind of predictions and kind of breaking down what this could mean for the set. So we're going to do that all on the show this week. Before we do, though, let's mention our sponsor channel, Fireball.com. That's a place to go for all things Magic related on the internet, including awesome free content right on the front page of the site. You can get a whole bunch of videos and articles and even podcasts like this from some of the best players and content producers in the world for Magic. A particularly good article this week was the London Mulligan Rule mathematically benefits strategies that rely on specific cards by Frank Karsten. His titles are very searchable, very, very on the nose, but seriously, Frank, from a strategy and theory standpoint, is one of the best writers and minds in the game, and you get to hear and see his breakdown and his take on the London Mulligan Rule, which we touched on the show before, and we'll see how that goes when the next Mythic Championship rolls around, where it will be sort of beta tested on that tournament, and then we'll take it from there. Another thing that I want to mention is the Discord. There is now a Discord for Channel Fireball. You can join. Well, it's right on the front page of Channel Fireball if you go there. And this is, there's rooms for all types of stuff. I joined it a few days ago, and, all types of Magic topics are going to be covered in there, and it's pretty cool. This could be one of those big Discords where you can kind of find the conversation that suits the way that you play Magic. And you get a bunch of neat little things in there too. You're going to be doing an AMA in there, right?
Yeah, on Monday I'll be doing, Ask Me Anything AMA. And it's been a fun place to hang out. So far, it's like we've got a lot of, people who like CFB, and then a lot of CFB content producers and people and folks who work at CFB who are just like, hey, what's this? And then we just kind of make fun of Mashi mostly. Mashi, for those of you who don't know, is my original Magic TV co-host right when we founded Channel Fireball. And we haven't done that for a while, but I still get to make fun of him, though there's no cameras rolling.
Yeah, well, Mashi's very opinionated when it comes to his Magic views, and they're rooted in 1997, I'd guess. Maybe
Yeah,
98.
yeah. All he talks about is pillage and avalanche riders, so it's like 99 or whatever.
There you go, 99. And so yeah, make sure you check that out right on the front page. And while you're there at CFB, you can order any singles, sealed product, or supplies that you may need for Magic. You can also support the show via the Patreon. Patreon.com/limited resources is where you can go for that. And as part of that, I've got a playmat here. And this playmat is, where did I put it? Oh yeah, I put it in a shipping thing already. Phyrexian Metamorph. Dude, this is a sweet mat. Oh, yeah. This one's nice. And this was from GP Vancouver from a while back. And this one is going to go to Kaleem Oldzier from, well, this is, I think what is this? I think it's a military base, maybe. The address. So I don't really know where it's at, but Kaleem, thank you so much.
And you probably shouldn't say it on air.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it anyway, but I think this is how I read this.
Well, didn't we have someone who lived on like Manowar Drive? That was so sweet.
That was insane. And there was even I thought it was a joke, but it was real. Yeah. But anyway, Kaleem, thank you so much for your support of the show, and I'll get that thing out to you. And then, so let's do, all right, here, what we'll do is we'll make our pack one, pick one. We're going to be doing pack one, pick 2, pick 3, and pick 4. We'll make that the special pack that has the Planeswalker in it. And no, we cannot pick it, Luis, for our thing. And then, of course, we'll be giving away the special Planeswalker in here. By the way, there's still some pretty nice ones left. I should mention that I think the most sought after one is the Dak Faden, and we haven't actually
the greatest thief in the multiverse.
Yeah, that's the one. God, don't even start with me. All right. We're going to cruise through these. We're going to assume that at this point you've drafted the set a few times at the minimum, if not a bunch of times like Luis and I have. And so I'm going to cruise through because reading every card gets a bit cumbersome. So hopefully you can keep up. Bring to Trials the first card out. I'm not going to first pick it. Coral Commando. So Coral Commando, I'm thinking about making a new
Carl Commando?
I think.
Sorry, Carl, not today.
Is this Carl? I think I'm making a new category for the Sunset shows. That is card when your opponent plays it, you decide I have to quit Magic unless I win. Right? Like if they go Coral Commando, it's like, all right, it's all on the line now. I can't lose to a Coral Commando. I refuse. And Coral Commando might even win this. Win the award for this one. Feral Maca. No, Plague White. I know that we both are, like, hey, you can play that card, but come on, we're not first picking it. This is like super mediocre pack so far. Axebane Beast. Wow. Gross Spiral. No. Exposed to Daylight. No. All right. Here's one. Grotesque Demise. So our first removal spell in the pack, and certainly the front.
I mean, I love me a Plague White, but yes, I'm still taking Grotesque Demise over Plague White.
Yeah, I mean, Demise, God, it kills 5 mana, 6 mana spells in this set.
Yeah, there's just some pretty expensive creatures with low powers, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, which is weird. And a lot of them cost 5 mana. Sphinx's Insight is next. I do like that card, but I'm not first picking it over Grotesque Demise. So that brings us to our uncommons. First one's pretty nice, though it's interesting. I've actually shied away from it a bit. It's called Clear the Stage. This is the 4 and a black instant. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. And then randomly, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you can return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. I mean, it is a classic 2-for-1 if you can get everything to line up, but boy, it's in black.
Like this card is not good. I have been very unimpressed with it. So it's kind of funny. There's two things going on. One is that you almost never get the kicker part, the having a 4-power creature part. And then the other is that you end up, as much as Grotesque Demise kills 5-drops, this because it goes off toughness, I have been having trouble even killing 4-drops with it. It just doesn't work quite as well. It just happens that there's a lot of like low power, high toughness creatures in the format, which makes Grotesque Demise better and Clear the Stage worse.
Yes, and like you said, you never, like, Debtor's Transport is the only card that ever gets this thing going somehow. So I still like Grotesque Demise over it. I like this next card a lot too. It's Code of Constraint. That's the 2 and a blue instant. Target creature gets -4/-0 until end of turn, and you draw a card. And if you addendum it, the creature doesn't untap during this next untap step as well. Where are you at on Code of Constraint versus Grotesque Demise?
I would take Grotesque Demise. I think they're pretty close in terms of like raw power level, because Code of Constraint locking down anything for essentially 2 turns and drawing a card is a pretty good deal. Also can win like combats if your 4/4 bounces or attacks into theirs. But Grotesque Demise is just a much easier to use removal spell, and as loath as I'm to admit it, I'd rather start in black than in blue.
Okay, I would actually take Code of Constraint here. I have been really high on any of the cantripping, the ones that draw a card. So this and the bounce spell, the Wrestler's Admonition. Combine Guildmage. This is blue-green for a 2/2. And whatever, you can pay 1 in green, tap it to have your next creature enter the battlefield with a counter on it, or you can pay 1 in a blue and tap it to move a counter. You know what? I'm not a fan of Combine Guildmage. Like, it reads fine, but every time it's on the battlefield, it feels like it does very little. It can make combat mildly annoying, but I just don't respect this card. Like, when somebody plays it, I'm like, oh, whew, God, I'm glad that wasn't, named some, I'm glad it wasn't Sauroform Hybrid. That's a card I actually worry about. I never worry about Combine Guildmage. It's just too slow in my mind.
Yeah, I think it's still fine. I think what you're running into, funnily enough, is the situation where you think it was going to be really good. It's not. And then you think it's mediocre, but it's also not that. It's mediocre plus. It's
okay. That's fair.
I would always run it in Simic, and I'm actually happy taking it around 4th or 5th pick in my Simic decks, just because it's a 2-drop. It's a 2-drop that has value that your opponent often has incentive to kill, and every now and then does something. What it's not is a Guildmage of yore, right? Like the Guildmages in previous iterations of Ravnica were largely first pick bombs or close to it. And This is not that. This is a good curve filler. This is closer to like Plague White than it is Feral Macha. It's way better than a 2-mana 2/2 no ability. It's not as good as a 2-mana 2/2 or 2/1 with a good ability, but it's good enough. I would still just take Grotesque Demise, though.
Okay, now I'm going to challenge you on this. So in this pack, we have Code of Constraint and Combine Guildmage. Is Code of Constraint being monocolored enough for you to take it over the Guildmage first?
I would first pick Code of Constraint over Combine Guildmage, and I think Code is actually just generally better.
Okay. Yeah, I'm that's where I'm at too, but I like to try to kind of contextualize these things. Because I agree with you. I mean, I don't think Combine Guildmage is bad. I just never prioritize it and therefore never get it.
It's just, it's the sort of thing where you also value it less than the average person does, which is why you don't get to play with it, which is totally fine.
Yes. Yeah, that happens all the time. By the way, our gate is a Gruul Guild gate. We're not taking it here. All right, we've got a rare, and this is actually a rare I would take over either of the cards. It's Bedeck Bedazzle. Specifically Bedeck. Yeah, it's either 2 black, 2 red, or a red and a black for an instant, and a creature gets +3, -3 until end of turn.
Yep, so basically all the hybrid rares are pretty solid, safe first picks. My first pick at the Pro Tour was Warren to Warden, and I ended up in Orzhov, and that's why they're so good, is because Bedeck is a playable card in, Rakdos or Gruul or Orzhov. It's basically in every guild that touches those colors, which makes it a much safer early pick. And even in the case of Bedeck Bedazzle, Bedazzle's 6 mana to destroy a non-basic land and deal 2 damage to the opponent. That's just not a good card. So
right, I've only cast that once, and it was because my opponent was
It's a way to it's a burn spell for 2, but basically this is a lightning strike, a creature only lightning strike. But because it costs red or black mana and it can go in 3 of the 5 guilds, it's a very safe first pick. So this is even better than the monocolor cards we talk about, which go into 2 of the 5 guilds.
Right, and it's crazy when you think about that, how flexible these things get. So yes, Bedeck would be my first pick. And by the way, our Planeswalker, wow, this looks way better than the OG, is Sorin Markov, which is, they did a really good job with the artwork on these. And then randomly, like, each of them has come with an emblem.
Of themselves, right?
Yeah, but since Sorin doesn't have an emblem, it came with a construct.
That's weird.
like a construct. Like the ones that get bigger for each artifact you control. So whatever, I'll put that in the sleeve too. And that is going to go, before we get to pack 1, pick 2 here, to Joseph Burris from Richmond, Virginia. Thank you, Joseph, for your support on the Patreon. Okay, so we've got Bedeck, and then we don't like to put too much emphasis on this, but we are passing Grotesque Demise and Code of Constraint, Combine Guildmage, and a Clear the Stage. So those are things that we know we've passed. Now, the really important part starts to come up here. Now, this next pack actually isn't the focal point, because if you put too much emphasis on pack 1, pick 2 as far as signals go, you're probably making a mistake, particularly if there's a rare missing. So you don't want to overemphasize the signal aspect too early in the pack. But as I always try to say, It's all about data points. You're going to get one data point here that is relevant. It's just not everything. Sometimes you see people go, oh, well, I got past a blank, like one of these uncommons or whatever, so I had to move in. And it's like, well, you don't know that for sure yet, because the player could have easily taken a rare that was just better in that same color pair. So let me pick for player 2 really quickly here. No, not that one. Ooh, there's one. Nope. Oh, that's one. Oh, wow. Holy crap. Okay. Well, I'm going to take this one, and then I want to talk to you about this pick after, Luis. So I'm going to tell you what we have now.
Sounds good.
This was quite a pack. Slimebind, which I love.
I do like Slimebind, but it doesn't fit particularly well with our first pick.
No, it does not. Spike Wheel Acrobat.
I do not like Spike Wheel Acrobat.
Yeah, that one's not going to make it. Hazda Officer, no. Axebane Beast, no. Rakdos Trumpeter, no. Clear the Mind, no. Rafter Demon, most disappointing.
Well, wait. Why do we skip over this Rakdos Trumpeter?
I just feel like
I love me a Trumpeter. I've second picked Trumpeter before.
Okay, all right.
Let's just calm down there. Let's back up. Rakdos Trumpeter is important for a couple of reasons. And I'm not just saying that because you skipped over it and I wanted to make a big hullabaloo about it. But
but you have actual reasons. Okay, good.
I do enjoy that part. Rakdos Trumpeter is a 2-drop, which Rakdos really does need, because a lot of Rakdos' cards, including their best card, Blade Juggler, basically works much, much less well if you don't have a good 2-drop. And this is a 2-drop that's unblockable on turn 3. It's almost impossible to end up in a spot where your opponent can block this. And because it pumps, it can actually threaten real damage later. I've also played this in Orzhov. Once you get up to about 2 to 3 Blade Jugglers, ideally 3, Rakdos Trumpeter becomes a playable card in your main deck. So
okay, yeah. Well, okay. So the next card was Blade Brand, and then the next card is the reason probably why I skipped over it, because remember I had seen this pack. Skewer the Critics.
Okay, well, yes, Skewer the Critics is better.
I apologize for my bias there.
You're let off the hook this time, but Skewer the Critics. After it's also perfect to take Skewer after Bedeck Bedazzle, because you're still. I mean, Rakdos Trumpeter is still a monocolored card, but it's kind of like 1.5 colors. You really do want to be Rakdos. But if you have Skewer and Bedeck Bedazzle, you could just be Gruul, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and that's great. So that's definitely the front runner here. Next card is Titanic Brawl, which we wouldn't take. This is an interesting situation that comes up all the time. This is Basilica Bellhaunt. So this is the Orzhov CCDD card. And, it's a powerful card, and we could totally play it with Bedeck. So do we want, again, and this goes back, by the way, to our last episode, the episode we did about re-breaking bread, right? And about, well, what are the really important things here, right? And this already gets to the crux of that, because we have Skewer the Critics and Basilica Bellhaunt sitting in our hand here. And I haven't even got to the rest of the pack yet. And we could take either of these, but we're still facing down this power level versus chance that it makes the deck consideration here, right?
Yes. And I think that Skewer it's much higher on that list.
Right, me too. Even though, Basilica Bellhaunt, I don't know, it's probably a more powerful card. I don't know. But I mean, it's a 2-for-1 and it gains life and it's big and blah, blah, blah. But I would still take Skewer. I agree. Sentinel's Mark, no. We have an Orzhov Guildgate, no. And we are missing a rare, but we do have one more.
This is what goes back to your point earlier of pack 1, pick 2 not being, it's not the biggest signal, because when the player to your right just takes a rare, it really doesn't mean anything about the rest of the pack. The rares, are just so much better in a lot of cases that they could easily have taken an Orzhov or Rakdos or red card, and then passing Skewer and Bellhaunt really doesn't give you a whole big signal.
Yeah, exactly. And boy, this is another card that now we get to put on that same scale that I just mentioned with the Bellhaunt versus the Skewer. It's Trollbred Guardian, the notorious TBG, 4 and a green for a 5/5, 2 and a green, adapt to each creature you control with +1/+1 counter, and it has trample. I mean, this is on my short list of best uncommons in the set. I think this card is just
despite our show about how to avoiding bread, Trollbred has an exception carved out, and I would like some delicious Trollbred. I also think that the fact that Bedeck Bedazzle is an actual 2-color card, or a hybrid card rather, means that taking Trollbred Guardian here is completely legit, because
Me
Yeah,
too.
it puts you into Gruul more than anything else, though obviously you're still very flexible. But it's such a more powerful card than Skewer that I would be happy taking that second pick.
Yeah, I mean, and that is exactly what I would take here. But boy, that is sweet to, kind of get a chance to really highlight the power level of these hybrid cards. Okay, so this is player number 3, and let's see what they're going to take here. Not that one. Oof, okay, I'll do that, I guess. And then this is passed to this person. Oh, this is rough. Well, I take that one. All right, so if they do that, then this means that our pack has Goblin Gathering.
Okay.
Persistent Petitioners. Scorchmark. It's okay for...
It's fine. I actually like Scorchmark a little more in Gruul than I do in Rakdos anyway.
Why is that?
Just Gruul sometimes needs it. Like if you're heavier Gruul, thick Gruul, as it were, and you've got a lot of Trollbred Guardian and like Frenzied Errinx type stuff at the 4 and 5 slot. Having Scorchmark early really does help. Whereas Rakdos really just wants to play an aggressive 2-drop, where Gruul is totally fine just using their turn 2 to kill the opponents.
And then take over late. Yeah, they have so many good mana sinks and high mana creatures. Bring to Trial is next. No. Thought Collapse.
No, not particularly close here.
Yeah. Footlight Fiend is a card that we could take, but I think I like Scorchmark better than that. Here's one. Rampaging Rendhorn.
I like Rendhorn. I think given the cards I already have, I'd still rather have Scorchmark just because Rendhorn is pretty, it's pretty high on the curve and you already have a 5-drop at this point.
Right. Senate Griffin. No. Catacomb Crocodile. Definitely not. Bankrupt in Blood is our uncommon. No. Here's a card we don't want to see on the other side of the battlefield. Pitiless Pontiff.
Yeah, that is at its best against Gruul for sure.
Yeah. And then we've got a Gruul Guildgate, which we could consider, and a Tin Street Dodger. That's the 1/1 for 1 in red, and it has haste, and you can pay a red to have it be unblockable by creatures that don't have Defender.
I don't like this card very much. Is it just Scorchmark? It is. This pack is not. It's not that you're getting a great card, but I'm not really seeing a big signal, except for there being a good Orzhov uncommon, which isn't a great sign because you'd rather, you'd rather the people passing to you are in Orzhov because that's one of the ones that doesn't overlap at all with Gruul. Not that you're Gruul yet, by the way. At this point, you got 1 green card, 1 red card, and now about to have a second red card. Could easily still be Rakdos, but I would still just take Scorchmark. There's nothing to move me off here. If let's say to make it a little more interesting, let's say if that Pitiless Pontiff was a Mortify, I would just take the Mortify.
Okay, you would,
and
because you would take that as an actual signal.
Yeah, I would take it as a signal. Yeah. And here's the other thing: go back to our Bedeck Bedazzle, flip the switch. All of a sudden, that plus Mortify both go in Orzhov. That's how powerful it is taking these cards. Pitiless Pontiff doesn't quite get there for me, especially since Scorchmark is a fine card. So I'm still not on the train of abandoning Trollbred Guardian in favor of Pitiless Pontiff, but I am very close. So I will keep an eye on my next pack here. And this is why I don't care that much about the signals I'm sending to my left. Even if the next person down is taking Pontiff, if I still see a good Orzhov card, like they took Bellhaunt then Pontiff, right? If I still see a good Orzhov card next pick, I would not be afraid to move in.
Okay, well, I've got the next pack ready for us here. And this is our 4th pick. This is Rebel Slinger.
Okay.
So playable but not exciting. Impassioned Orator. No. Humungulus. No. Noxious Grudian. No, not really either. Steeple Creeper. Fine.
Yeah, not impressed with any of this stuff.
Rakdos Roustabout. Which I guess we could take. I really wouldn't want to give up Trollbred Guardian because it's our best card.
Rakdos Roustabout is just so mediocre.
Yeah. Rebel Reading. How about no?
Unplayable.
Yeah. Clear the Stage. So there's another Clear the Stage.
Yeah, still not too into that.
Here we go. Gate Colossus.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes it easy. Yeah. Gate Colossus is by far the most powerful card in the pack here. It also is, while not exactly completely colorless, it does go into a lot of different kinds of decks. The reason I say not completely colorless is because it does actually care about which gates you get to a degree where you don't want to play a bunch of colorless gates. So you actually are going to care about which gates you end up on if you want to actually be able to play the Gate Colossus. Mm-hmm. But at 4 gates, it's fine. And at 5 or 6 gates, it becomes pretty good. At 7+, it becomes busted. Right. So I like that. Plus, I actually like green when it comes to gate decks. And every card you have so far is pretty good in a gate deck. The 2 cheap removal spells and even the Trollbred Guardian is fine.
Yeah, also, I like the fact that the strategy works out well. Like 2 cheap removal spells plus 2, more expensive but really hard to deal with creatures is great.
And if you're in green, you get Open the Gates. It's like an additional gate there. Yeah,
that's true. We've got a few more cards, though I will say they will not hold up to the Gate Colossus. There's a Simic Guildgate. There's a foil Territorial Boar. Which I don't really like that much. And then there's even a mythic rare, Emergency Powers, which is not
a big fan of this one.
So there we go. That puts us in Gate Colossus here.
Yeah. So the Gate Colossus, getting past the Gate Colossus here, doesn't mean a whole lot in terms of colors still, right? Like this doesn't mean anything about which guilds are open. It does show that whoever is passing to us is someone inexperienced, is my guess.
This is somebody who's just completely gone off the rails. Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, hold on. I'm going to do one more because I kind of want to see where this goes. This would be that. And then if I had this pack, I would definitely take this. And then this guy's windmill in that one. And then that leaves us. Okay, so our last pack of our Cracker Draft here. And then I want to touch on what do we think people are doing, especially you. Obviously, I happen to know exactly what's going on, but Quench.
No.
Another Rubble Slinger. No.
Still no.
Arrester's Zeal. That's the pump spell, so no.
Yeah, not into that.
Undercity Scavenger, the 3/3 that can be a 5/5. No. Exposed to Daylight. No. Here's one. Titanic Brawl.
Yeah, that's playable, especially with Trollbred Guardian Colossus. It gets maybe a little better, but I'm still not very interested here.
Burn Bright. Really not what this type of deck wants. Angelic Exaltation.
So it's still feeling to me like Orzhov might be open, but at this point, my enthusiasm to switch is a lot less, especially since Angelic Exaltation isn't particularly good with a lot of the stuff that's going on there.
Right. Again, we're trying to leverage our big... we're going tall rather than going wide here, and Angelic Exaltation and Burn Bright both reward you for going wide rather than what we're doing. And so does this next card, Cavalcade of Calamity. No.
Yeah, I'm not.
There's still a rare here, but it's Lavinia, Azorius Renegade, which has a lot of text that isn't particularly relevant for limited. And then there's an Azorius Guildgate.
Well, I'm pretty unhappy about all this. I actually would be inclined just to take Azorius Guildgate here.
Oh, interesting. I would just take Titanic Brawl. What's wrong with the little brawl in here?
I don't think Titanic Brawl is very good, and it's not. This deck actually is not shaping up to be that great of a brawl deck because by the time you cast Colossus, you really don't need it. Trollbred, it's a little more defensible. You also have 2 cheap removal spells already.
That's true. We have Scorchmark and the what's it called? The deck.
Yeah.
So the Guildgate though is double off color currently. So you're taking it. Why? Is it because of the Gate Colossus and you're just going to run a colorless land or what?
Yeah, it's because of Gate Colossus, and I think that this is actually it's funny because we talked about how the Gates deck is not a deck that you should be going for as much unless you have clear signals. Here, I'd like to keep myself open to it, and I think that there's a chance that the Gate deck could be open here. Getting a 4th pick Gate Colossus is a good sign. And all the cards we have are pretty easily splashable.
That is true. So that is interesting.
This is where I would take the higher payoff card, even though I think that the odds that Azorius Guildgate's not in my deck at the end of it is definitely higher than Titanic Brawl. But I don't think I've ever had a deck in the history of Ravnica Allegiance where I've been like, man, this deck could be perfect. I just need another Titanic Brawl.
One brawl short of greatness.
Right. Have you ever come to the end of deck building? I've come to the end of deck building and cut Titanic Brawl plenty of times. For sure. But have you ever had a Gate deck where you're like, wow, I really just wish I had another Gate?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, of course.
Every time. This is literally every time. Yeah.
What's the statute of limitation on Ben Stark beats? Because I already made fun of him in my tournament report, but
you're clear.
He did. Okay, good. Well, he practiced only on Arena and then draft where the Gates deck is abundant, and then drafted a Gate deck with only 3 Gates and 103. So Slight mischaracterization there, but Ben's not going to listen anyway, and I'm sure nobody's going to tell him.
You got the green light. All right, so you're taking the Guildgate.
Yeah, I would take Azorius Guildgate, and it's to keep myself open and flexible here because I don't feel like I'm giving up much in terms of power, and I think that there is good flexibility there. It also means that what if next pick we see a good blue card? Mm-hmm. Then it could easily be like some sort of Simic sort of deal or Teamer. I like Teamer as well. And I don't know, I like being able to play like if we pick up an Archangel or somehow a Gatebreaker Ram, all of a sudden we're just full on gates.
Yeah. It's interesting because I have to admit I would have just taken Titanic Brawl here, given that the Azorius Guildgate is double off color. But you've kind of convinced me.
I think that's a defensible position, but
I don't actually want to defend it. You've kind of convinced me because I do like taking shots where I can. I just didn't really recognize this as a spot to do that. I look at this deck and I think, okay, well, I kind of know what I'm doing. I know where we're going here, but really we don't yet. Like this late Gate Colossus should have been a bigger sign to me that, hey, if other people aren't prioritizing gates, and I might be able to do it. Also, let's take a quick look, but every pack we've had passed to us has had a gate in it, right? Like there's obvious, like it's very clear that nobody is cutting the gates deck from the side because we got a Gate Colossus and because there's a gate in every pack that's been passed to us. So
yeah, and I think that that's a good thing to keep an eye on. What were the people passing to us? It feels like I don't have enough information to make too big of a proclamation besides not Orzhov.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is really interesting because, and every single time we do this, or every time I do a deep dive on one of the draft viewers from the Mythic Championships and Pro Tours and stuff, there's always something that stands out to me very strongly that I'm like, remember this. Don't let this go away from you, because when you listen to shows like ours and you put a lot of time into reading signals and understanding how these draft things work and where you can get your edges, I think that it's tempting for us to try to pretend that we have more control over things than we actually do. And there is a strong element of randomness when it comes to booster draft. And as it turns out, it's crazy because nobody to our right is in the colors that we're in, except for a touch here or there. So the right. person furthest from us first picked Senate Guildmage, and then that's the only pick that we got to see from them. The next person first picked Law Mage's Binding, and then out of a pack that they could have taken an Azorius Knight Arbiter, took Grotesque Demise.
Yeah, I actually like that pick quite a bit. I think most people would actually take the Arbiter, but yeah, I think that most people I think a lot of people I know who draft that I'm trying to find a way to phrase this that doesn't compliment you, but draft at a very high level would take the Grotesque Demise because of how good Esper is and how replaceable the 5-drop is.
Right. So the next one first picked Unbreakable Formation, then Azorius Skyguard, and then they did take the Azorius Knight Arbiter. So they've got just like a straight up kind of Azorius thing going on. Then the person directly to our right first picked Sphinx of Foresight over the Trollbred Guardian. And I don't even know if that's correct, but I just said most people would probably do that.
Well, I do think that's correct. I think Sphinx of Foresight is better than Trollbred Guardian.
Yeah, I do too. But I mean, that's one of those things where you're going to get opinions. It's not going to be the only. You're not going to be the only one with that.
Yeah, but factually, it's just much better.
We're dropping facts. Okay. Then they took Aeromunculus, Chillbringer, and Sauroform Hybrid over that Gate Colossus.
Look, all I'm going to say is that there was a Mythic Championship that featured Ravnica Allegiance, and I made top 8 of it. Might have gone 4-2 in the draft, but I still did make top 8.
And 4-2 is pretty good. That's top 8.
Yeah. Honestly, like for those who, haven't been lucky enough to play at like Mythic Championship or day 2 of a Grand Prix, the competition's pretty tough. When I go 2-1, I feel like I accomplished something.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. So anyway, but when you look at it, it's crazy because the person directly to our right is in Simic, and then everybody else is in some combination of Esper, right?
So we're in the right space.
So we're actually in the right space, even though our last pick was Scorchmark into Gate Colossus. It's not like we were getting these great, we weren't getting.
Well, sometimes they're just. Yeah, they just aren't. The packs just don't have a lot of red cards in them, because red is the one color you'd expect to get in this spot.
Yes,
and they're it just so happened that the packs were kind of light on red cards, and that'll happen sometimes.
Right, but the key is that I could easily see somebody who like us who puts a lot of effort into this stuff sitting there going, well, red's not open. And the crazy part is that red is absurdly open right now. Right?
So this is a good instructional draft, and I've talked about the draft I did at the first draft I did at the Mythic Championship also. So it's really a sort of like a confidence level that's updated after every single pack and trying to figure out what's going on. A couple more picks of this, we might come to the conclusion red is being cut, but then all of a sudden, like, what if we just got like a super late, decent red card, right? Like, what if we got a Frenzied Airynx, like, 7th pick or something,
right?
Like that could happen with this pack, or in the second draft I did at the Pro Tour. And the reason I'm using these as examples is because I remember them a lot more vividly than the Magic Online drafts that I do so many of. But like, I got a Savage Smash with 2 cards left in the pack, and like, once you get that, you can say with certainty that the next person's not Gruul, and probably the 2 to 3 next to them are not. And so sometimes you get these kind of like really obvious like lodestone picks where it's like, oh, this just proves this is the smoking gun. Because like
super signal.
we need to come up with like a catchy name for it because that's part of our hashtag brand. But I actually think a smoking gun is the perfect way to describe it, where every single, the whole point of the draft is you're a detective trying to put together all these like little pieces of information and come to the conclusion. Yeah. If you got a Blade Juggler 8th pick, or you wield what if the Pitiless Pontiff came back 10th pick? Those are just like irrefutable evidence that the way is clear on those colors or guilds. And I think the way this draft is laid out, I wouldn't be surprised if this was a real life draft and people continued down the path they were continuing. You would see a really late red card or Gruul card and lead you down the path of thinking, oh, okay, or Rakdos card potentially, though there's not very many good Rakdos gold cards that lead you down the path of saying, oh, this is actually really open. And I think once you did that, you'd be a lot more satisfied. And then going into pack 2, since you've still passed, like we haven't passed a good red card except Skewer,
right?
Which we took the Trollbred over. Once you do that, then pack 2, I imagine, would be pretty good for you in Gruul, especially since both Gruul and Simic next to each other are really cutting green.
Yeah,
that I think you're going to end up in a good spot this draft, whether or not you go down the Gates route.
Yeah, well, and then that would lead to a pack 3 that was also a good spot for you, because if like we've opened a below average amount of Gruul and or red cards out of this first pack so far, but if 3 has an average amount, then we'll be in a good spot there too, because we're certainly not getting cut from the right on it. Okay, good stuff, and hopefully we win the draft.
I love doing the Kraken drafts because they're drafts, and drafts are really fun.
Yes, I agree. I do like drafting as well. By the way, I'm going to call you Draft Detective Louis Scott-Vargas from now on. Okay, let's get into Modern Horizons. So again, this one I don't have a whole lot to talk about. I just wanted to touch on it because I remember seeing it and going, So this comes out in June, and it's a full set, 249 cards, but it has a mix of reprints of not yet legal in Modern and new cards. And they say that they're going to celebrate Magic's rich history.
So basically this is going to be stuff like, well, completely new cards that are legal only in Modern, but then also stuff like, well, potentially, Counterspell, Accumulated Knowledge, and I guess probably not Cabal Therapy because we already saw a preview card that looks like that. Just stuff like that. Probably not Wasteland either. Sorry.
Yeah, probably not. I saw people speculating on some, Force of Will and stuff like that. I wouldn't expect them to fundamentally change the format in that way, but it's not impossible. But the difference here, right, is that when you think of like a master set, right, which this isn't, but when you think of like a Modern Masters type set, they had some number of cards in there that they wanted to get out into the wild, right? They always put Tarmogoyf in those ones so that you could get those into the hands of the players, is what my assumption is. And those were like usually mythic rare cards that, didn't affect limited in like a profound way, right? They were cards that would show up every once in a while and sometimes be pretty broken, but mainly, the feeling that I got was, well, let's get these things out into the hands of the players that want to play them in Modern. But that left kind of the rest of the set as, we'll make it really good at limited. That's kind of what they seem to do with it, is say, well, if we can just have the choice of any reprints that we want that are legal in Modern, well then, I mean, dude, you throw that at a design or a development team at Wizards of the Coast, and they're going to come up with something sweet. And they'd usually reach back and go for groupings of similar and overlapping mechanics. Like, we saw like the last one had like, discard with dredge and also madness and, stuff that cared about the graveyard and all this. They kind of would do groupings. We used to see groupings of like artifacts, for affinity, but it also overlapped with other stuff. This is different though. Like this one is only from cards that weren't previously in Modern and or new cards that they made specifically to be played in Modern. How do you make a good limited set out if those are your requirements? Like that seems very tricky to me.
So to be clear, having no knowledge of it besides what's been announced.
Yeah, and same with me, by the way. Otherwise,
there's always conspiracy theorists out there.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for this because what I think is going to be a format that has more powerful cards than what we would normally see. The whole point of this is cards that are too good to print in Standard. Or maybe not all is too good. Sometimes that are just too weird or wouldn't make sense in Standard. But in general, cards that aren't appropriate for Standard. And that reminds me of Modern Masters, which have tended to be pretty good draft formats. And I think this is going to go even more off the rails because it's going to be new cards, new themes. We're going to get to see some completely new stuff. And I'm really excited about that. I think it's going to be a wild ride. My guess is we would not recommend this as your entry point into drafting. But for people who have done a lot of drafts and want to try something new, I bet it's going to be awesome.
So, but you think that they're going to be able to come up with like a cohesive draft environment similar to before?
I've been told it's designed for draft. I mean, they did say that in their announcement.
Yeah, so. and they're going to do events
maybe
on it.
But I don't know. I've been told it's been designed for draft.
I've heard that too, but I wonder, like, with the other setup, I could easily see that. If you told me, here's how this works, we're going to make sure that these cards get into the hands of players and then the rest is up to them to just sort of pick to craft the best limited experience, I'd be like, well, right. They could definitely do that. But this one has it's like that's flipped around completely, right? Like, isn't this really hard to make a good limited environment when your prime directive is to make cards for Modern? Like, if the goal is to get cards printed so that you can play them in Modern, that's not really congruous with, well, let's make a great limited format, right?
Well, we don't know exactly what emphasis the goals are on, right? Like we know that it is a set that's going to have an impact in Modern. I mean, that's kind of the idea, but that doesn't mean it's like 90% have an impact in Modern, 10% limited. It could have been like, here's your two goals. They're both equally important.
Oh, okay. Okay, sure.
The other thing is having an impact in Constructed does not take very many card slots, right? How many cards get played per set in constructed formats? And the answer is just not that many.
Especially Modern, right? It's like one
especially
or two
Modern.
Or yeah.
And your rares and whatnot can carry a lot of weight. So getting to put a lot of power in your rares or even in mythics and maybe some uncommons, but letting the commons largely dictate how the limited format gets played out. That sounds pretty good to me.
Okay. And then they can choose to either make new cards or pick any card that wasn't previously available in Modern, but that will now be available in Modern.
Right. And my guess is
old cards.
Yeah. My guess is we're going to see some completely new themes bolstered by new cards and new mechanics, and some older themes with a retread based on the cards that they get to reprint. But we're talking like old, like Shadow or something like that.
Oh, because they would have to dig kind of deep into the history there to find this stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that seems fine then. All right. I'm certainly interested in it. Right. I want to see, but when I first saw it, I thought, well, gosh, if they're going to try to shoehorn this in, isn't that kind of hard to make a good limited set? But perhaps not. All right. Let's talk about War of the Spark, because this one's coming up sooner and perhaps more importantly to our audience as well, because we're going to be playing a lot of War of the Spark. Well, most of our listeners will probably only play Modern Horizons a couple of times at the most. So War of the Spark is the next set, by the way. It's it's kind of, I don't know how to put it. It's the third of the 3 Ravnica based sets, even though they're all standalone, but it is the third of that kind of arc. And this was a quote from an article from Chris Gleason that he had on Daily MTG about, it was actually about some some artwork on some of the Planeswalkers that got shown in a video. But he said, you'll have to wait. This is a quote from me. You have to wait for War of the Spark previews in April to see the new cards, but each booster pack will contain a Planeswalker. So you should have no trouble getting your hands on them when the set is released. And that was just kind of, I'll just leave this here. That was just, I'll just set this down right here from Chris. But people are like, wait, what? every pack is going to have a Planeswalker in it. And look, from a constructed perspective, I don't think it changes all that much. I mean, it's kind of a cool thematic thing, but like if a card is good enough to get play, to see play in standard or further, then it will. And if it's not, then it won't. And it doesn't really matter how the packs are constructed or, you know, what's in there. But for us limited players, it matters huge. And immediately I saw reactions from especially limited focused players or limited leaning players saying like, well,
the sky is falling.
This is stupid. Yeah, they kept saying, well, there's just going to be planeswalkers everywhere. And like, you don't have the tools in limited to deal with it, to deal with a bunch of planeswalkers and all that stuff. And so I thought we should touch on this because there's a lot of really interesting space in here. And it's a good time for us because since we don't know what's going on, we can speculate on it and try to figure it out. So
I love unfounded speculation.
Oh yeah, some hot takes incoming here. First, the one thing, by the way, that that stood out to me was a planeswalker in every pack. Sounds like there's going to be planeswalkers just on every game, every turn. You're always going to have one, that kind of thing. But it actually only means that you have a chance minimum to first pick 3 of them. So on average, if you just average out, like if everybody picked randomly or whatever, it would be 3 per deck.
Well,
per player.
3 per card pool.
3 per card pool. Well, I'm just saying if everybody first picked their planeswalker, then everybody. Well,
what I'm saying is yes, 3 per card pool, but not 3 per actual deck. Like it's going to be lower because not all of them are going to get played. Yeah.
I'm saying like just the opportunity to play them. Each player has a chance at 3 planeswalkers, right?
Yeah. So my guess is the average it's going to be closer to like 2. Is what end up you when you shuffle and present, your average opponent will have 2 planeswalkers in their deck. I think.
Yeah, I think that sounds right to me. But I'm just saying, like, if we're setting the ceiling, yeah, I mean, because I'm assuming that some of them won't be very good, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, and to be fair, that is way more than the average, which is nothing, right?
Yeah.
Like
on average, you see a planeswalker every couple drafts or something.
Right.
Like
exactly. Right. So so it is noteworthy that we have a lot more, but it's not so many more that it's like this is just the planeswalker set where it's just all planeswalkers all the time. So that's the first thing that came to mind. So let's just sit down, take a breath here and go, okay, if we're going to see if each player gets spotted 3 planeswalkers, we know that not everyone's going to always make every deck unless they design them in a very specific way. So like you said, I agree, 1.5 to 2 or something per deck. So the first thing that comes to mind is what do these planeswalkers look like? Like, are we talking about what we think of as a planeswalker, which is a mythic rare, very powerful, 3 abilities, +1 for some small value, minus something for, large value and ultimate to win the game. Is that like, do we think like that?
No, my guess is that they're gonna deviate from that formula. Like there will be cards that look like that. But I think that we're going to see a much wider range because you just can't design, what's it like 28 planeswalkers or something like that, however many that they said there were going to be, and have them all be the same formula. That just wouldn't make sense. It would be pretty sloppy / poor. So
yeah. Also, that is the fear, right? Like it's like turn 4 and somebody's like Chandra, and you're like, okay, cool. Here's my,
Nixalis -3, kill your thing.
Right.
Okay,
like,
here's.
Yeah, that wouldn't be fun.
I mean, it's actually been a running joke that the average planeswalker has 5 loyalty, +1 draw card, -3 kill a creature, -8 ultimate.
Yeah.
And they basically do that, and I actually think it's gotten a little out of control. Like how often they've repeated that recipe. So I would expect to see a couple different things. I would expect to see planeswalkers that are build-arounds. So we're talking more Tezzeret type planeswalkers. Tezzeret cares about artifacts, right? There are a variety of Tezzerets that don't do very well in like Tezzeret Agent of Bolas, for example, does not do a whole lot in decks without artifacts. So that's not just a generic powerful planeswalker. It is powerful.
Sorry to interrupt. The Liliana from M19 or whatever.
Yeah, the Dark Realms or whatever.
Yeah, the one that cared about zombies.
The zombie Liliana.
Yeah.
So I would expect to see, I don't know, 5 or 6 planeswalkers in this vein, that end up having pretty specific build-arounds. And these are the ones that will sometimes get, relegated to the sideboard and limited and are more for constructed. Though I'd imagine they'd all have outs to be good and limited. I would expect to see probably in the vicinity of another like 6 to 8 that are pretty close to the like -3 kill a thing +1 draw a card. Like you'll see a bunch of those because I mean they seem to not be able to help themselves. And then I would expect to see a pretty wide range on the rest. I would expect to see planeswalkers like that do more things like drawing cards in weird ways that don't necessarily impact the board or kill things.
Like looting or like smaller effects.
Yeah, or planeswalkers that don't have an ability that defends themselves. Like we've seen planeswalkers like that before, right? That basically just have like various card draw or resource gathering planeswalkers like Jaya Ballard, for example. Lets you add mana or lets you loot cards away or rummage cards away. She doesn't actually protect herself. And I think that we're going to see some planeswalkers that do that. Okay. I would expect to see probably like 2 to 3 expensive planeswalkers, like 6, 7 plus mana.
Right. Of course.
We're talking about our Karn, Nicol Bolas type deals. And, you know, you'll end up with these planeswalkers that probably have huge impacts on the board, but also cost a ton of mana.
What about rarity? Are we going to see uncommon, rare? Is there going to be a common?
I don't think there will be common, but I think that there'll be uncommon through Mythic Rare. And given that there's one
common planeswalker is too complicated, right?
Yeah, but it's kind of fake because there's one per pack, but the rarity could help the distribution. Like let's say there's a cycle of 5 uncommon planeswalkers, and you see those like 2 or 3 times as often as you see the rare ones. Then there's the mythic ones which show up even half as often, and you end up seeing these planeswalkers, especially if there's ones at like uncommon that maybe have. I could even see a planeswalker with just 2 abilities. You know?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask too. Or it sounds weird. 1 ability?
I think 1 ability is unlikely, but I could see a planeswalker with 2 abilities. I could see some planeswalkers that only tick down, like Sarkhan the Mad is the example from previously, but I could see a simpler version of like a 3 or 4 cost planeswalker with 4 loyalty that it just has like maybe 2 different -1 abilities and no ultimate. Okay. And just, you know, you use up the planeswalker and then it's gone. Because here's what I think you want to avoid. You want to avoid all the planeswalkers being must kills and dominating the game. Because I think War of the Spark Limited will not be very fun if that's what ends up happening. I don't think that's what's going to end up happening because that's just such an obvious danger that I would hope, you know, that the development and design teams are just looking at that and be like, okay, let's not do that. Because the way current planeswalkers work, which is totally fine because they're all mythics, is, yeah, generally when you play a planeswalker, your opponent has to kill it or they end up losing. That's like almost universally true, right?
Yeah.
And I think that if everyone has 2 planeswalkers in their deck or maybe more, that's just going to be lead to a lot of pretty unfun games that are somewhat repetitive where it's like, yeah, my opponent was on the play and played 2-drop, 3-drop, and then planeswalker on turn 4 and I could never recover. Because, yeah, that would happen if they played Elspeth, Knight Errant, or a planeswalker of that power level. But I think that we're going to see a lot of planeswalkers that have abilities that don't affect the board or abilities that maybe you don't even need to answer. There are some planeswalkers like that where, you know, they're in play and you realize like, I actually don't need to kill this planeswalker. Like this planeswalker is not doing anything.
Yeah. Like Kaya.
Yeah. Kaya is a good example of that where, yeah, she's a fine card. If a set can absorb a lot of planeswalkers at Kaya's power level without it feeling bad or completely warped. Yeah. Right. Like imagine if there's like a cycle of 5 planeswalkers that are of similar power level to Kaya and those are the uncommon ones. Yeah, that's not going to mess up your limited format. It's going to make it feel different, but that's fine. Limited formats should feel different from another.
Yeah, and I really wonder what kind of space they're willing to, because there's this weird juxtaposition there, right? Where on one hand, I hear you saying this and I'm like, yeah, I've thought about this too. And it makes sense, right? Like the non-board affecting planeswalker, the incremental advantage planeswalker, the only 2 ability with no ultimate, the minus only, you know, where you're kind of like on this, you're going to get these 3 things, you know, it would feel like a saga at that point, right? Where you're just like, I'm going to get these things and then it's going to be gone. And it's a matter of when I want to do this or whatever. But also they've really positioned planeswalkers to be basically the most exciting cards you can get, right? Like if you play limited and you open up one of the really powerful planeswalkers that you were just referencing, I mean, that is super exciting, right? You're just like, oh my God, I got this ultra powerful card that interacts with the game in this different way than every other card in the set. There's only a couple of these. They're mythic rare. You know, you play that 2-drop, 3-drop planeswalker and it feels like a totally different game than the normal limited that you're used to, where it's like creatures and removal and stuff like that. And on top of it, they've just marketed it so heavily towards like planeswalkers are the face of the game. And they're this really kind of splashy, exciting thing. And if you get a little too in the weeds with it and you're like, well, this is, you know, Dovin Bond's cousin and, you know, he loots and makes a Thopter once every 3 turns. And you're like, well, this is a lot more fair. And this is a lot more interesting from a gameplay perspective, but it's like kind of boring. Right? It's not flashy or exciting. It doesn't make you go, oh man, I opened a sweet like if you go to a local store and somebody opens up a planeswalker, they usually get pretty excited about it. And I think that Wizards really likes that. You know, I think that that's like a real selling point for these things. And I wonder, you know, maybe this is just a one-off and it's fine, but it does feel a little strange to get it into the turning the knob so much that we're like really trying to make these planeswalkers almost not exciting on purpose. You know, it's like that's kind of the point of them is to be a little less, exciting. And that means you have to dial down the power level. I wonder if they give up a bunch from the planeswalker kind of perspective.
Yeah. So there is such a thing as, you know, like fatigue, and in terms of losing, the uniqueness and what makes something special, where it's not a bad thing to do it, but you are cashing in some chips when you do, right? Like when you make a set and it's got Eldrazi at all rarities, the Eldrazi become a little less mythical and a little less imposing and cool. It doesn't mean you shouldn't make an Eldrazi set, though Battle for Zendikar was just horrendous, but that's for a lot of reasons. I'm not going to blame the Eldrazi. Rise of the Eldrazi was awesome. It just means that you have to pick your spots, because sometimes if you make an all Planeswalker set, you probably can't do that maybe ever or for a long time, right? Not all Planeswalker, but 30 Planeswalkers or whatever. And it's a gimmick. It's a gimmick, and gimmicks can't be repeated very often. And it does take a little bit of luster away from Planeswalkers. Imagine you're a player who started somewhat recently, and Planeswalkers have always been these rare and I've only heard of or only see every now and then. And all of a sudden there's a set where there's Planeswalkers that are worth 50 cents that people are throwing in the garbage because you open 3 in every draft of this uncommon Planeswalker that clearly doesn't do anything. Well, that takes away some of the mystique, and that's totally fine because you have these resources at your disposal and you get to use them, but you are paying a cost, and Wizards of the Coast is well aware of that.
Okay. Flipping this around.
Like so Flipwalkers?
I actually wonder if we'll see those too.
We
right?
might, yeah.
So some creatures that become planeswalkers. But the thing that the other way that you could approach it, though I do see this as a lot more risky, but I wanted to ask you about it, is instead of making the planeswalkers worse, you could make the answers or the environment either the answers better or the environment more hostile to them from a limited perspective, which lets you keep intact the idea of making a bunch of super powerful, super exciting planeswalkers still, as long as you equipped the format or the players with cards or board states or whatever that were hostile to the walkers. Is that feasible? Could you just put a bunch of stuff that says kill target planeswalker? Or
you could. I don't like that path very much, because you end up with a couple of problems. One is it might just be an arms race where you can't just make 2 mana deal 4 to a creature or a planeswalker, because then you're just printing hyper efficient removal spells. Like, you can make that card, but you can't make it at common unless you really want to work the limited format.
Okay.
Right? Because imagine Lava Coil at common. Same with like Doomblade or Hero's Downfall. And then if you actually want to combat planeswalkers maybe more specifically, you could do something like, 1 in a black, kill target planeswalker, or cycling 2 if that's a mechanic, or some other mechanic where it doesn't kill a creature or planeswalker, just a planeswalker, but maybe you have a way to use it or get rid of it if there's no planeswalkers around, or it's just narrow and just kills planeswalkers. I don't know, but I don't like that idea quite as much, because I feel like that will effectively warp the Luna format in a way that planeswalkers may not have, just by trying to fight the planeswalkers.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like a tricky thing to engineer as well. Yeah, right? Like if you got it a little bit wrong, it's like.
Right. Yeah. The strategy of print overpowered card, but then ways to kill overpowered card has generally not worked out well. It reminds me of the Simpsons episode where they, keep releasing new animals to combat the earlier ones. The monkeys, take care of the birds, and then the sharks take care of the monkeys, and then, it just doesn't work out great. So I think saying like, yeah, let's make a bunch of overpowered planeswalkers and efficient planeswalker Doomblades doesn't sound like the direction I would want to go. One thing I did want to talk about today is how to play against planeswalkers and how to play with them. Because
great.
We don't know, again, exactly the text on these, but there's, I think, some heuristics. Love me the heuristics about planeswalkers that are worth noting. One is that, and this is the one that might be outdated, so I want to get ahead of it. One is that not all planeswalkers are must kills, and I think that even though we've been trained to do that, I think the biggest difference and the biggest way that you can win here is really, really evaluate whether the planeswalker on the other side of the board is something you need to kill. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things I like about planeswalkers, even underpowered ones like Kaya or Jaya Ballard or whatever, when I play these in a game of limited, my opponent frequently makes bad attacks trying to kill them. Because we've been trained, right? We've been trained ever since we picked up a planeswalker unlarian. You got to kill the planeswalkers.
I mean, that is a good heuristic, right?
Well, it is. Yeah. And there's a reason for that. It's because if you let your opponents, Garruk or Dovin Bond or Domri sit there, you're going to lose. But it turns out you can let Jaya sit there or Kaya sit there for a while. Kaya, you might even be able to sit there literally forever and still not lose to it. Mm-hmm. So make sure you actually need to kill the opposing planeswalker. Really evaluate what the effect it's having on the game. And that's going to, vary walker to walker. One of the things I think we're going to do once we get our grubby little hands on the list of cards, the spoiler, is I actually just want to separate into must-kill planeswalkers and ones that aren't. Because
we'll do that on the show.
I think that's really valuable. The other is try to figure out when you're playing against a planeswalker or playing with it, you're on the opposite sides of this. Try to figure out how you get the board to a place where combat favors you, especially when it comes to defending or attacking a planeswalker. So to use the example of, let's say you do have Domri, right, in this format. And Domri does not protect himself, right? His ability is +1, add red or green creatures you play with that mana have Riot, or -3, you get to look at your top 5 cards, put 2 creatures in your hand. So no way to protect Domri. You're not often going to want to just slam Domri immediately. You're going to want to try to set it up so that you're able to play Domri and then defend Domri, and you're going to want to try to save your removal for flyers. You're basically playing as if Domri was your life total, and you want to preserve your life total at all costs.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that.
And when your opponent looks like they're setting that up, like they're not taking a trade that seems obvious, or they're just, playing creatures out and don't seem like they're trying to kill you, but they're trying to set up a good defense. That is when my alarm bells go off and I try to think, okay, if they played a planeswalker, how am I going to get through here? Removal is obviously the best way, but it might be that saving a pump spell so that you can attack and kill the planeswalker is worth it. Because imagine this attack. Your opponent has out 2 4/4s, and you have a 4/4, a 3/3, and a 2/2, and they have a planeswalker on 2 loyalty. If you attack with all your creatures, you're losing 2 creatures, but they're losing a planeswalker. Yeah, that might be worth it. Now imagine that you lose 1 creature on each side. So it's their 4/4, and you've got a 4/4 and a 3/3. Now it's a 1-for-1. If you attack their planeswalker with those 2 creatures, they might eat your 3/3. You just straight up traded your 3/3 for a planeswalker. The fact that you killed their planeswalker at the end of the deal means that you don't end up losing out. Like there's always that card there. So it's worth throwing away a creature a lot of the time.
Yeah, because that's going to end up being 3-4 cards down the line.
The other thing to keep in mind is when, as the person defending a planeswalker, you should just fail to defend it, and when, as the attacker, you need to overkill it or not send everything at it. So another example here is you've got a planeswalker with 4 loyalty, right? And they attack it with 2 4/4s and 2 3/3s, and you've got a pair of 5/5s or a pair of 4/4s actually. You can try to defend it by blocking their 4/4s, and let's say it has exactly enough loyalty, the 2 3/3s take it to 1 and a 7 loyalty. Or you could just throw away the planeswalker but eat their 2 3/3s, and that might actually be better.
Because that gets you way ahead on board.
The other thing is, once they're killing a planeswalker with their attack, any excess damage there is wasted. So what if they attack planeswalker with 10 creatures? Often it's best just to block none of them or only make blocks where you're eating their creatures. You don't get any extra benefit of having your 6 loyalty planeswalker take 6 damage versus 100 damage. It's exactly the same. It just dies.
Yeah.
So Planeswalker combat is complicated, and I think it's going to be something you're going to have to learn. But there are, again, some shorthands of how you can kind of play with and against Planeswalkers that do help.
Yeah, I think the other thing that comes to mind for me when I see a Planeswalker on the other side of the battlefield is it's usually quite early that you're put into that position that you just mentioned, where you have to actually say, do I need to kill this Planeswalker or not? And if your answer is no, right, if you can come up with a plan, one of the ways that you can actually figure out if that's the case is by looking at it from the perspective of what happens over the next like 2 to 3 turns, right? Can I actually kill my opponent with the hand that I have in the board state that I have if I ignore this Planeswalker? And that can be very, very difficult to parse because many Planeswalkers either change the board state, which you would know about by, creating a creature or whatever, or they add cards to your opponent's hand. And if that's the case, it's very difficult, right? Because you look at it and you say, well, if the board stayed exactly the same over the course of the next 3 turns, I could win the game by ignoring the Planeswalker. But if my opponent is drawing 2 cards per turn, right, by doing so, then it's probably not going to stay the same, or I'm going to get outpaced and they're going to have enough blockers to beat me. So these are the really intricate type of things that you have to try to figure out. And oftentimes it really means going into that mode that we talk about on the show all the time, where sometimes you have to ignore it. Like if you look at it and you say, I cannot kill this Planeswalker from this position, I can only try to kill my opponent. And even if the answer to yourself is, well, that's probably not going to work, which it often will be the case when your opponent has a Planeswalker, you still sometimes have to just take that line and pretend as if the Planeswalker wasn't there, which is scary stuff because you probably know in the back of your head that you're going to lose. But look, if it also means, well, I'm just going to attack everything at this Planeswalker, give up most of my board, not get my opponent to a life total that gives me outs to actually kill them, but get the Planeswalker from 6 loyalty down to 4, and then they just pump it, and then you're done anyway. Well, you should certainly, consider that and say, well, I just have to ignore this Planeswalker, get my opponent down to 3 life, and hope I draw my burn spell or whatever. And these are going to be, I don't know, like how often, like you said, Luis, if we're going to see two Planeswalkers on average, they'll pop up often, right? Not every game, but often. And so these are decisions that we're all going to have to brush up on and get a lot better at, going down the line. And this actually brings me to another thing that I wanted to mention about these. And I'm really curious to see how they handle this as well, is the snowball nature of Planeswalkers, right? They tend to get better and better and better the longer that they sit. They protect themselves. They add more cards to your hand, which then gives you more options to keep your Planeswalker alive, which then keeps it alive longer, which just gives you more and more options. And all of a sudden you win the game. And that is the one thing I think that I would be most fearful of if I was designing the set, was just the idea that there could be play patterns that are just like, I play a Planeswalker, and then every turn that I have it for the rest of the game makes it less likely that you're able to deal with it. That is the play pattern of the really powerful Planeswalkers we have now, but doesn't necessarily have to be the case for these versions that Luis and I are envisioning about, that don't affect the board as directly, or that, don't do quite as much.
I would hope it's not all these incremental advantage Planeswalkers, because yes, when you play against a Planeswalker, like, Elspeth is another good example. Every turn they're making a 1/1 and taking up loyalty. So it's really hard to get ahead on that.
Yeah.
Or Garruk making a beast every turn or whatever. And one other note, by the way, is some Planeswalkers with like -2, -3 abilities that do something. Often it might be correct to attack non-lethally into a Planeswalker to turn off that ability. Because let's say you're playing on some Planeswalker like Dak Feeden Rao Zarek that's -3 to kill something. Mm-hmm. You might want to, if it's at 4 loyalty, attack even though you're only getting 2 points, because that puts it on a 2 loyalty and can no longer use that, the -3.
Yeah, that happens all the time, right? To protect your board. Yeah. Do you think we'll see Planeswalkers that are just bad?
Yeah. Yeah, I think okay. I think some of them will be Tibalt level Planeswalkers that just don't do much.
Do you think that we'll see cards that are like build-arounds that care about having Planeswalkers?
Oh, totally.
Like some enchantment that says whenever a Planeswalker enters, whatever, something like that.
The most obvious one is the one I think you were going, which is your Planeswalker will start with +1 loyalty or something like that.
Yeah, something like that, exactly. Yeah. Or you can use your Planeswalkers twice or whatever.
I'd be surprised if we did not see like at least 2 Planeswalker build-arounds.
Okay, because that's kind of exciting.
Or even just like a creature. It's like whenever you play a Planeswalker, this gets a 2 +1/+1 counters or something like that, or whatever. Like some sort of defensive creature.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that gets bigger if you have a Planeswalker. That's cool. Like it Yeah, I like that. That's a cool flavor with that too. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, strategically speaking as well, you mentioned how combat gets affected, but what kind of cards are more desirable in a world where you're likely to face down at least one planeswalker in a game? Cards like direct damage or threaten effects. I mean, we always come back to this, but flying is just the best. It's just always the best ability, and that doesn't change. But what kind of things go up in value that we don't normally look at?
Ways to make something unblockable, like you said, evasion, but more specifically, one shot evasion. Like, I can imagine a card that's like 3 mana, target creature's unblockable this turn, draw a card, being just a good card in this world,
because it could just say kill target planeswalker. Right. Yeah.
I think that damage, like it used to be that direct face damage let you kill planeswalkers. Now, all damage just says whatever it is, like player or planeswalker or what have you. But
I mean, does that go up? I mean, because is that a reliable way to actually kill a planeswalker?
Imagine a card that's like 1 in a red or 2 in a red, deal 4 damage to target creature or to target player or planeswalker, not creature.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking about.
Yeah, I think that this is a card that you're more likely to play.
Okay.
This one I'd have to know what the format looks like, or if your deck just wants a Lava Spike / Lava Axe to begin with. Mm-hmm. But I think that if everyone's running Planeswalkers, a card that has an effect that kills a Planeswalker like that, even if that's not the only thing it does, could be good.
What about threaten? What about steal your creature for a turn?
Yeah, threaten's okay, or making something unable to block, or what, cards like that. I think those are okay, but I'm not super excited about those because those can still just be easily thwarted by them having 2 blockers or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think, and then there's obvious ones that it's interesting because to say that they would go up in value, but when something's already premium, it can't go more, like cards like Oblivion Ring style effects, enchantments that can take out non-land permanents or whatever would obviously be even better in a world where you're likely to face planeswalkers, but those were already excellent. So it's not. Yeah,
no, that's a good point. Vindicate and, other unconditional removal spells are going to be really good in this world.
Yeah, which was always going to be the case. So that was a joke. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting though, because we will have to go through.
Oh man, I'm just really excited about the level ups we can do once we know all the planeswalkers. Cause I think that we just scratched the surface with like a little bit there, but I think that there's a lot to dive into. And I'm always really excited whenever a limited format gets upheavaled or, gets the table gets flipped, because that's what's going to happen one way or another, right? These planeswalkers are going to heavily impact the texture of this limited format, and it's going to be in a way that I think is going to be very interesting to dive into.
Yeah, and I like that they're taking the risk too, because I think it'd be tempting just to say, all right, another good set. Here we go. There's a little twist here. We're doing these color pairs, that kind of thing. But this is like really taking a shot at something. And hey, even if it didn't work out, like we'll always look back and be like, hey, remember that one when they tried to do all the planeswalkers? Like, boy, that sucked. Or, or we'll look back and go, that was sweet. Like you could just, like we'll get used to playing with planeswalkers all the time. And then when they're not there, you're like, like I look at the back of my pack to see what planeswalker I got, and there wasn't one there anymore. And I always feel like that whenever I play a gold set and then I go back to like just a normal, individual colors type set, where I'm always like, man, I want to see a CCDD card. I want to see some really powerful, great thing in it, and everything seems to be dumbed down a little bit. Anyway, War of the Spark, of course, when it becomes when it gets closer, we'll turn our eyes towards it, and we'll do our normal run up with the rules and mechanics, and then the set reviews and all that kind of stuff too. We'll be diving deep into War of the Spark and getting a real feel, because like Louis said, once we know the actual cards, the planeswalkers, and how the set is set up, we'll have a lot more blazing hot takes and opinions for you here on LR. All right, that will do it for the show this week. Thanks so much for coming along. As always, we appreciate having you along for our little chats about our favorite game. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast on lrcast.com as well. As every episode is up on Channel Fireball, they are the sponsor of the show. And while you're there, well, you can sell some cards back to them. This is the circle of life, as it were. This is the way that you can maintain your hobby, because Magic's not cheap. Let's face it, right? This is an expensive hobby, and it takes some foresight, a little bit of thought to make sure that you're getting your proper value out of it. And one of the ways that you can do so, and longtime players know this, is they take those rares that they've got and you sell them back to Channel Fireball. If you want to trade them in for store credit, you can get max value that's 30% extra. So whatever your cards were worth, they'll tack on an extra 30% on that trade-in bonus, and you can use that to buy more booster boxes so you can draft with your friends, or sleeves, or whatever it is that you need. If you need singles for a deck, you can transform those junk rares that you're not going to use anyway into the stuff that you actually want. And that is just a great way to keep things rolling for your hobby of Magic that we all share. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier about Dak Faden reminded me of the first time I did coverage. So
when was that?
The first event where all I did was coverage, not just, show up for top 8 or what have you. The first event I did, like the first big event I just did full coverage for was Worlds 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
I was there.
It was a funny introduction. Yes, you were. So to set the stage, it was in Amsterdam, and it was in the Convention Factory.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe that.
Well, that's the name of the place. It's the Convention Factory.
Wait. Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a factory that makes conventions.
Well, it's more like a factory, and then they put conventions in.
Yes, it actually just looks like an industrial factory.
Yeah,
but they cleared out all the machines and put some tables in. There was no AC because you don't normally need it, but it was super hot, and our uniform for coverage was blazers and guild t-shirts. It was unbelievably bad. I've scoured the internet. I couldn't even find pictures of it, which is great. I don't need.
Oh, I have pictures of it, buddy.
Yeah, it was bad.
It's real bad.
So I'd say coverage style has progressed a little since then, at least. The heat led. So at one point, Kibler's in the feature match area, and he's about to play his match or whatever, and he's just like, "Oh man," I'm like, "What?" He's like, "It's so hot in here. I really shouldn't be wearing this jacket." He's wearing a leather jacket, but he's like, "But I look so good in it."
I remember that jacket.
And he wasn't like, this is just with no trace of irony. Kibler was just saying that. He was just saying this is what went through his mind. His jacket, he looked really good in his jacket, but it was really hot. He kept the jacket on, just so we're clear.
Oh man!
Another great moment was the fact that we had ad reads to do, and by we I mean Marshall, because he was the play-by-play.
Just the worst.
And there was a comic book that was published recently, a Magic comic book, and the tagline it was about Dak Faden. This is what reminded me of it. You talked about Dak earlier, and it started off. Actually, why don't you go ahead and do a reading?
Dak Faden is the greatest thief in the multiverse, and then it was something about IGW.
Yeah, no one cares about the rest, but it was a little bit more exciting than that. You were like, Dak Faden is the greatest thief in the multiverse, and then
and I had to read this constantly. Like it was in the ad read rotation for a year.
And again, we've progressed some since then, but back then, basically every hour on the hour, it was Marshall. Dak Faden is the greatest thief in the multiverse.
And all the rest of the ads were totally normal. Yeah. They were just like Ultra Pro,
Yeah, Ultra Pro, the official sleeve sponsor of the World Championship. Sure. Totally fine.
And this one had this like ambitious opening dramatic line that I had to keep reading over and over.
And you know what? At the end of the day, I still did coverage. Despite this being my entry point.
I mean, that was the worst though, because what happened was I was in the booth with you and Zach.
Yep.
And you guys teased me mercilessly about this stupid ad read. And I even told this story recently because it's one of my greatest triumphs in the booth. Was at one point I knew the ad was coming up, and I assumed that you guys didn't know that the ad was coming up. And you had teased me about it like for 2 days straight. And so I get the paper ready and I'm waiting for them to tell me to read the ad. And I look over at you and both of you guys are just staring at me with like, trying not to laugh. And I'm like, oh my God, like I am going to burst into laughter during the middle of this ad read because these idiots are just giggling away, staring at me while they know that I have to read this just horrendous ad copy. And damn it, I got through it. I read that thing and I didn't laugh. And I just thought, you know what? I got this. I'm here to stay. That was my ultimate challenge in the booth.
Yeah, no, that was forging you on your path to coverage greatness. I just sent a Facebook message to you and Zach Hill.
Oh God, great! And now he's going to remember. I'm sure he. I have
all it is Dak Faden is the greatest thief in the multiverse.